Hello and welcome to episode 26 of the Ascendancy podcast. My name is Chris,
I'm Austin.
and on today's video, we will be sharing our thoughts as vegans on the American Thanksgiving holiday. Seeing as the holiday is coming up right here in a couple days, we thought it'd be a good time to talk about this one and share our thoughts on it. As vegans who understand that animals do not deserve to be exploited by humans for food, clothing, entertainment, or any other purpose, it's all too easy to see the fundamental absurdity and hypocrisy of Thanksgiving, claiming to practice peace and gratefulness on this holiday while basing it fundamentally on the exploitation and slaughtering of millions of turkeys. So at this point, I'll lend it over to Austin. He's going to do a little screen share for us and show us what these turkeys go through to be sacrificed for this American tradition. He's going to break down some numbers and talk about who turkeys really are when they're not cut up and cooked on your dinner plate.
Absolutely. It's one thing to hear about statistics, but it's a whole different and greater thing to see the actual reality of it for ourselves. So before I actually talk about these statistics, I want to show you, the viewer, what we're actually talking about. Because as they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words and a video of the truth is worth even more. This is going to be disturbing and this is going to be graphic, but as people who engage in this tradition or have engaged in it, we have a duty to the animals to see the truth. So this is going to be some footage of the standard, legal, acceptable, socially acceptable exploitation of these intelligent and sensitive beings. So as you saw, the slaughter of these beings is horrific and grotesque. And I want each of us watching this to really think about what that experience was like for these animals to be decapitated, to be cut. I mean, if you've ever been, cut, the pain of that. Even a small cut relative to that is horrific. That's on a completely different scale, a different level. The exploitation is like a hell that we've created on this planet, being done onto the most innocent beings. For what? For a tradition, for fleeting taste pleasure. I intentionally skipped the part where they were beating and kicking the turkeys while transporting them. And this is because we don't want that to distract from the core of this. There is no right way to enslave animals. There is no right way to treat them as objects. So while this extreme abuse is prevalent, we want to show what the quote-unquote best case scenario looks like, so we don't have a distraction on this. There is no right way to treat an animal as a slave or as an object for our gain, even if you don't beat them. The actual imprisonment and slaughter is certainly enough of an injustice as it is. So don't think that on your uncle's family farm that it's somehow morally acceptable. And for Thanksgiving alone, 46 million turkeys are slaughtered annually. According to Farm Ford, domestic turkeys in intensive systems in the U.S. are typically slaughtered between 18 and 20 weeks of age. Keep in mind, these birds live for in excess of 10 years and they're killed between 18 and 10 weeks. So they're essentially babies, essentially infants, when they're being slaughtered. And turkeys are far more intelligent and emotionally complex than people realize. They can recognize human faces and remember specific people or locations for years. They're highly social. They form tight-knit, lifelong matriarchal groups, which mothers, daughters, sisters, and aunts cooperate to raise and protect the young. So they look out for each other, they love each other, they socialize with each other, they form family units. These are very sensitive, very loving animals, and they communicate with more than 30 distinct vocalizations. Each one has a specific meaning. They tend to be calm, curious, and even gentle around humans they trust, often approaching quietly or following familiar caretakers. But when threatened, especially when defending young, hens become fearless and aggressive, readily charging dogs, coyotes, or people. So they are fiercely protective of each other, of their babies. Like they really value their young. They really want to protect each other. They see their own worth. Whether or not people do is outside of the equation. They themselves value their own lives and their young, and that should be enough to make them deemed worthy of moral protection. And from a young age, humans are conditioned to see animals as food, as property, as mindless automatons, and this then leads to them viewing it as justified to dominate and exploit animals. And turkeys unfortunately fall in this category along with most other animals. And when people say, oh, turkeys are dumb, there's like barely anything going on there, that shows a complete disconnect, and that's actually a blatant lie that's spread to objectify the victims, to make it so we don't consider them. These are highly intelligent, highly sensitive animals, more so actually than a cat or a dog. I've met turkeys personally, and I've been blown away by how intelligent they are and how big their personalities are. This disconnect from them, of seeing them as an object, is just rooted in fallacy. It's a complete disconnect from reality. And I'm not saying that if they weren't this way, they would deserve to be exploited. All animals deserve to be protected from humans and from exploitation. But this brainwashing that people have to see them as stupid or to see them as insensitive is just pure propaganda. This is completely disconnected from the truth about how they actually are. So I encourage you to see them in a more natural state, to see them on an animal sanctuary, to get to understand them and see their personalities. I mean, we owe them at least that. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Austin, for sharing that horrific footage and breaking down some numbers and talking about who turkeys are. And, in discussing before we started filming this podcast, we thought, it would be pretty important to show the reality of what these turkeys go through as standard legal practice, because it's out of sight, out of mind for most people. And that's kind of what allows so many people to mindlessly engage in this tradition every year. You just see the shrink wrap turkey at the grocery store. You don't think anything about this was a living animal, what their life was like. You just see a product, you just see food. But vegans, we see the reality. We're exposed to what they're actually going through. And whether it's on an intensive factory farm or your Uncle Sam's yard, the fundamental immorality remains the same, that these beings are being treated as objects, as property, as commodities that are dispensable so that we can celebrate our traditions when obviously we can eat other things and enjoy, our meals with our families all together. There's no necessity to be consuming animal flesh for human health or sustenance. So, whether it's done on this mega farm and the turkeys are bred to be, 20, 30 pounds plus, or if it's done on a local farm where they're not bred to grow super quickly, fundamentally, they're still going to have their rights, their desires to live violated. They want to enjoy their lives with their families, just like, you do as well on holidays. And that's the core wrong. It's not necessarily how they're treated or the system that they're raised in. Arguably on a local farm, they don't have the money to use these expensive stunning methods using electrified water or other means you might see in a slaughterhouse, kill floor. So they just put them in the killing cone like you saw there and just slice their throat open and decapitate them. And I'm sure that is a horrific, painful experience in itself. And, whether it's in a large facility with those stun methods, it's also horrific, and you would never want that done to yourself or your loved one. So the core problem is not the treatment, it's just the fact that these turkeys are just being used as objects, as sacrifice objects for humans to celebrate their traditions. So yeah, going into like conditioning from a young age, ever since we're like in elementary school, we're taught, November, they have the turkey as like the picture for November. Like, we're planted in our minds from a young age that turkeys are food, it's tradition to eat them, and we don't question it. We don't think about, who turkeys are. We just think that it's just food, like they're just mindless automatons. A lot of people use the insult bird brain, very often to attribute a human of low intelligence, but as Austin laid out here, that couldn't be further from the truth. These are intelligent, sensitive, feeling beings. They are sentient, just like you, just like dog and cat, and that might be in your household, and they deserve our respect. And when it comes to Thanksgiving every year, it's always easy to point out this point. Like, a lot of people say that vegans are weird, right, for eating beans and tofu and not eating animal flesh. But I like to point out every Thanksgiving, every November, that there couldn't be anything weirder than carving a big hole in a turkey's dead ass and stuffing it with bread, and then eating that bread. You're eating ass bread. I mean, that is just weird and just kind of like bestial. There's something just off about that. So, from a young age, we're conditioned to see that as normal, eating stuffing out of a bird's ass. I don't know about that. I think that's actually pretty weird. Us vegans, we're gonna happily enjoy, our Thanksgiving plates, stacked with all vegan traditional foods and easily veganizable classics like mashed potatoes, veggies, vegan turkey, lentil meatloaf, pie, and so on. So yeah, it's just like you're conditioned to see that as being normal. Like, really step outside the box and think about that. And it's just a really cruel, ritualistic, like, embodiment of domination that we're gonna, kill you, we're gonna separate you from your family, and we're gonna carve a hole in your ass and stuff it with bread and just and eat your corpse. And yeah, it's just this is wild when you really peel back the layers and think about what this tradition is. Obviously, this is a good segue into the whole absurdity of Thanksgiving. Humans have a strong allegiance to practicing certain traditions, whether that's for good or for worse. In this case, with the theme of this episode, it's that you have to eat certain animals on certain days, certain holidays of the year. But why? It's just because, like, it's normal, other people do it, or it was always done this way. There comes a time where traditions need to be checked and evaluated and disregarded when they are, no longer ethical. The yearly ritualistic sacrificing of turkeys on Thanksgiving, it falls into this category. It's 2025, and humans claim to be evolved, compassionate, peaceful beings. We say please and thank you to one another. We obey traffic laws. We don't, go around shooting each other. We don't commit crimes. Yet we're still sacrificing these innocent animals who are unwilling participants in the sacrifice. Like, this is supposed to be the behavior of, ancient human tribes living thousands of years ago, worshiping rain gods and fire gods, not the behavior of humans 2025 who claim to be civilized. Like, it's absolutely high time for this to change. And these beings don't deserve to be sacrificed. They have no consent in it. It's not good enough to say, like, oh, I'm thankful for this turkey for being, killed for me to eat. The turkey had no consent in the equation. Who do they have to thank that they were, bred into existence just to be slaughtered, on the week of Thanksgiving? And yeah, I'll end it over to you, Austin. What do you think about that?
Very well said, Chris. And people, they gather to celebrate gratitude, sitting around a table in a performative way, a ritual of humility, while the centerpiece of their feast is the mutilated corpse of an enslaved bird. And the bird, who wanted to live and enjoy their life, was forcibly bred, confined, and decapitated so that they could be consumed by humans and turned into shit. And yet the humans speak of thanks and honor with mouths full of a life they destroyed. They mimic virtue while practicing domination, turning moral pretense into a farce. The entire holiday, the entire celebration, the act of gratitude before the corpse of a sacrificed innocent being is all pretentious. And people view Thanksgiving as an opportunity to spend time with family, to enjoy life, to reflect on their freedoms, which is good and well, but while violently separating the families of turkeys, ending their lives, and denying their most foundational freedoms, it's just pure stupidity. People view the act of consuming a turkey as a sacrifice, as though the turkey willingly gave themselves up to be consumed by a self-proclaimed superior species, while in reality the victims are dominated and slaughtered against their will. So imagine the roles reversed. Would you want to be bred and slaughtered and sacrificed to a more powerful entity to satisfy their traditions? Of course not. When you look at it that way, you can see the absurdity of it. This idea that we're so superior and so special that somehow turning an innocent being into shit is an expression of gratitude. You're so great that turning someone into shit is a way for you to express gratitude. It's insane. And then one of the most pretentious things in the United States is the pardoning of the turkey, the annual tradition where a president selects one of two turkeys and pardons them as though they were guilty of a crime. Being brought into existence as a slave isn't a crime. Existing isn't a crime. What is the turkey being pardoned from? What crime did they commit by existing as an innocent being, by being the wrong species? You know, if anyone, it's humans who would be pardoned by some act of extreme generosity for the crimes that are committed against our fellow earthlings. The entire thing is a farce. Chris,
Yeah.
what do you think? What have you experienced as far as like personal stories? Like how have you personally experienced Thanksgiving?
Yeah. Yeah, that's well said. The absurdity as we've laid out here is just all too obvious, especially when you pair it with, the reality, the footage that we showed earlier. And yeah, the pardoning of the turkey by the president every year is it's just so dumb. It's just like, well, why is this one turkey being spared the horrific fate of being slaughtered and consumed at the dinner table? Like, that's what they all deserve. They all deserve to be free and to live and to not be dominated and enslaved and slaughtered as babies. Even if they're slaughtered as adults, it would be wrong. But yeah. So when it comes to like my personal experience of Thanksgiving, it's something I've always celebrated since I was a young kid. And I want to relay a story about Thanksgiving that took place, like, I think a year before I went vegan. This was, I want to say, like 2017. I was in college, and I went back home to spend Thanksgiving with my mother that November. And I distinctly remember it being Thanksgiving Day. It was kind of last minute. We didn't have much food in the house, but we wanted to, celebrate Thanksgiving in the way we traditionally always have, at extended family gatherings with other family. At this time, it was just me and my mom. So last minute we went to the grocery store, and we got, of course, a couple of plant-based foods. We were planning on making gravy and making potatoes and making green beans, whatnot, the other things. But we were, of course, hell-bent on finding some turkey flesh to eat because, well, it's Thanksgiving, right? You have to eat turkey. So we went to the meat aisle. We found little shrink wrapped styrofoam case of turkey legs or something, and we were like, yeah, we got our turkey. We can go home and celebrate Thanksgiving correctly now or whatever. So I bring this up just to say that, I myself, I wasn't raised vegan. I also engaged in this tradition. And it was from like this NPC, like bot-like automaton mentality where it's like I'm mindlessly consuming turkey on Thanksgiving. Like, oh, this is what it's always been like. This is what it is. And, I don't want to sit up here like I'm on my soapbox that I'm just some perfect being that has never engaged in this ritual. Like I have as well for most of my life before I was vegan. And I highlight the story to show like I myself also was just conditioned to just see turkeys as objects, as food. It's Thanksgiving, we have to eat their corpse. It's the only way to celebrate Thanksgiving. And it's just, even in myself, after all these years being vegan, I look back and see that I was also, just a product of this conditioning, a product of the society, just mindlessly consuming animals for tradition. And I obviously abhor it, but, I highlight this to show that, it's never too late to make that change, to evolve and, become a better person ethically. I would say I'm definitely more ethically evolved and wiser now. No animals deserve to be enslaved, subjugated, and exploited and slaughtered for me to celebrate tradition or to celebrate a good time with my family. I can happily enjoy a vegan plate and do all those things all the same. So, if you yourself, you're not vegan yet, listening to this podcast, it's not like you have to dig your heels in the sand and just stay stuck in that lifestyle. If you can see the absurdity, you can see how it doesn't make sense to, practice gratefulness and peace while, having the cut up corpse of a innocent being on your dinner table. It's not too late to make that change and to evolve and become better. That's what we have to do, while we're here. So you can celebrate holidays and what you're thankful for in many ways. It just doesn't have to only be expressed through killing and consuming an innocent being who never knew peace or gratitude or fulfillment in their life. It's just stupid and hypocritical, and it's time to, evolve beyond these old traditions. So yeah, what about you on your end, Austin? Anything to share about your personal experience with Thanksgiving before you were vegan, or stories?
Yeah, I thank you for sharing. I remember a particularly morbid, heinous, and evil tradition that we celebrated on Thanksgiving. There's a bone in the turkey called the wishbone, and traditionally on Thanksgiving, like two people grab a side of this bone and pull on it until it breaks, and the person with like the larger side wins, and essentially their wish comes true. And I was just thinking about that, how deluded, brainwashed, indoctrinated do we have to be to grab a bone, a part of a being's corpse, and pull on it to grant a wish? Like, what veil of ignorance do we have to live in to commit such an extreme evil? And that's something that I partook in when I was a kid, a small kid, before I went vegan. And that makes me wonder, like, if we don't critically examine our actions and explore the world as a moral agent, we will commit evil. That is a guarantee. That is an absolute guarantee in this life, that if you don't reflect on what you're doing each and every day and you go with the flow of society, you will do horrifically evil things. I mean, imagine this. Imagine you're in that position of the turkey and you have two barbarians, two monsters, grabbing a piece of your skeleton and ripping it apart and then saying, "Oh, my wish is gonna come true." There's something just so insidious and deluded with that. And we have an obligation as moral agents to reflect on this thing that's called tradition. What is tradition? It's behaving in the way that people in the past did for no other reason than the sake of behaving as people in the past. If you want to have a tradition, if you want to have fun, okay, sure, but think about it, reflect on it, analyze the morality of it, and don't do things just because other people did them. If we live in this state of a fog, in this veil of ignorance, in this blindfolded interaction with reality, we're going to end up treating other beings in a way that we would detest being treated. So I really strongly encourage each of us, everyone, to start thinking about how your actions impact others, if they are actually ethical to do, so you don't commit the same mistakes of people of the past. Like, we can have fun, we can have holidays, we can express gratitude, but we can do that without exploiting and dominating innocent beings, and that is absolutely what we should be doing.
So before we go to the outro here, I do want to ask you, Austin, your whole family's vegan, after you've influenced them to change, which is amazing. So what are you guys going to be eating for Thanksgiving this year?
Yeah, we celebrate a completely normal Thanksgiving. We'll do sweet potatoes, mashed potatoes, Brussels sprouts, macaroni and cheese. For the protein, tofurkey, tofu, usually a combination of different proteins so that way people can choose like what they want, and beans. Really just like a completely typical Thanksgiving just without the animals. We'll do the pies. My favorite is pumpkin pie. Love pumpkin pie. Like even the healthier, lower sugar recipes are really good in my opinion. There's some good vegan whipped cream out there too that just like brings it to the next level. It's just because my family likes to celebrate on the holidays. We do it just for fun, just a way to connect with family. And
That's awesome. I want to highlight like the core point that you made is like having a normal Thanksgiving feast just without the dead, mutilated corpse of the bird on the table. Everything else that you think of, the supporting foods around Thanksgiving, those can all be easily veganized and made to taste delicious. So, yeah, it's awesome that you're having a great feast. It's all, in line with the basic values of respect, decency, peace toward the other sentient beings of the planet. And I'll sure be enjoying some of those foods as well. So, yeah.
when we go vegan, we're not giving anything up. We're just not taking what wasn't ours to begin with. So like you can live the same lifestyle, you can eat basically the same diet because we're not against a particular diet or taste or texture. We're against animal exploitation. So you can have the foods you love and enjoy, just like a version of it that isn't, the corpses and secretions of innocent beings. And, that leads us to our outro. We can still celebrate with our family, so I encourage you to celebrate with your family, express gratitude, reflect on life just without exploiting animals. They don't deserve that and they don't need that, and we don't need to do it. So let's just move forward without that animal exploitation. But hey, thank you for making it this far. If you're not vegan and you're watching this, check out the film Dominion from 2018 and see the full reality of animal exploitation, see what that actually looks like, what it entails. And I think when you look at it, you'll see, okay, this is all evil across the board. That's not something I want to support as a good person, as someone who strives to do good and be vegan. Thank you for watching.
Absolutely.
Peace.
Thanks for watching. Peace out.